Okay, we got to James 5, verse 2. Maybe got a little bit further than that, but we'll start there. Yeah, your riches are corrupted and your garments are moth-eaten. And there's two, actually three sections. There's two that's dealt with right here in this verse. It's a problem that people are rich. Is that the problem?
No.
Okay, that's right. It's not the problem that they're rich. The problem is they're hoarding up their riches. They're getting so much extra supply and they're not doing nothing with it. And what's happening is your riches are corrupted. Probably deals with like the food. There's three ways that you're kind of considered rich and what makes you considered to be rich. And this first one is probably more than likely talking about food. And so here, they have plenty of food. They got just all kinds of food. In fact, they got so much food and they've hoarded that food and they're storing up that food, and what's happening to it, it's ruining. And rather than give it to the poor or rather to distribute it where it's needed, they're just letting it ruin. And so, as they said in verse 1, you need to howl and cry and have all this because your riches is going to be a misery to you that's coming forth. Judgment's coming forth. And you're going to pay for sitting here having all this stuff stocked up and not sharing it with people and not distributing it and helping other people that needs it. The second part of this, and your garments are moth-eaten. Of course, this is one of the second ways that you can determine whether you're rich or not is what you got on. If you remember in chapter 2, verse 1 and following there, they were showing partiality, and one of the things that they could tell that this rich person was rich was his jewelry. He had on these rings and all these fine clothes and stuff. Well, they got a stockpile of clothes, and the poor normally, they're good to have one garment. And so here they are having all these garments that they could put on and things, and what's happening? They're just stockpiling them. And what's happening to them? The moth is eating them. Hey,
I don't have a whole lot of money to help folks with. Now, if somebody needs some gas or needs some help with medicine or something like that, yes. But I have the food. If people are not too lazy to cook it, I've been accused of giving too much away. Reason I don't make much money off of it. If a person gets too stingy to give stuff away, including the food that he has or money either, he's got a problem with God.
Yes. And that's part of these things. That's why they're going to howl and have misery, is because they're stockpiling this and rather than helping those who are in need. And like I said, verse 2, you got two of the ways that they're rich and they're hoarding it. One of them is, of course, the food, and it's ruining, and one of them is garments. They got so many garments that the moth is eating them up. In Matthew 6, 19, 20, we touched on this just a little bit last week. We know the scripture, they're laying up treasures here on earth where moth eats and where people break through and they steal and things like this. And where you need to have your treasure laid up is in heaven. And there you don't have to worry about things getting stolen. You don't have to worry about your moth eating them or rusting or anything of that nature. 2 Corinthians 4 and 18, we touched on this a little bit last week too, this is where things that you see, that's our temporal things. And that again is where this rich was putting their emphasis and where they were putting their trust and confidence in, is these things that you could see. Their rust, their gold, silver, their garments and their food, and they putting all their trust in that, and they had too much of it. Scott?
That is a problem, in the world, is people put all their time and energy in things that are temporal. They don't put their things, or they don't base what they do on things eternal. Jesus knew this was going to be a problem. That's why he told everybody, what does it profit to man to gain the whole world but lose your soul?
Exactly.
It's not. Jesus knew this was going to be a problem with man, and that's why he told the multitudes that. He said, when he told them.
There's a lot of addressing this issue that's here. Colossians 3:1 and 2. Well, second part of 2 Corinthians 4:18 is the things that are not seen. Those are eternal. Things that you can see and can touch and feel and look at and stuff, that's temporal things, and those are temporary. They're not going to last very long. So your confidence ought to be in the things that you can't see, that's eternal. And Colossians 3:1 and 2, we touched on this a little bit last week as well, is where's Christ at?
Heaven.
He's in heaven. He's at the right hand of God. Colossians 3:1 and 2 says, since Christ is in heaven, and since he's gone above, where should we be putting our attention? On things that are above and not on things of this earth. And so that's these main ideas that's here. They were putting their trust and confidence in their riches, is in their garments, foods, and things of that nature. The next way that you can determine that they determined whether they were rich or not was their gold and silver, money. And so here he says your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you and will eat your flesh like fire. You have heaped up treasure in your last days. Really true gold and true silver probably doesn't really technically corrode or tarnish. But if they have other metals mixed in with them, then they do kind of tarnish. And here's the idea here is, again, you're hoarding your money. You're putting it out there, and it's no value to nobody. You can't even use it because it's getting tarnished and it's losing its value and things. Or you're getting old and you've kept it till you got so old that you can't use it. You can't take advantage of your riches. And again, all of these things, your ruined food, your moth-eaten garments, and these tarnished, corroded silver and gold, all these are, guess what they're going to be? They're going to be a witness against you. And they're going to be, when you get to heaven, they're going to look up there and say, look at all this. You got stored up and hoarded up. And look what you could have done with it. Now these are witness against you because you're not using again. Again, the problem is not being rich. You need to understand that. It's not helping those who need help when you have a whole lot yourself that you could share and still be able to do what you need to do and take care of your family and things like that. Romans 2:5. Someone, Daniel, you going to read Romans 2:5? Can I pick on you today?
But after the hardness and impenitent heart treasurest up unto themselves wrath against the day of wrath and revelation of the righteous judgment of God.
Okay, because your hardness and unrepentant heart, you're storing up for yourself wrath. And what these people, again, that's what's happened to these rich people. They're storing up for themselves, all right, but what they're storing up is for God's wrath rather than God's blessing, because they didn't use what God gave them and blessed them with to help other people off of it. Verse 4, And need the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out, and the cries of the reapers have reached the ears of the Lord of Sabbath. And again, we keep emphasizing this, but again, the problem is not rich. What's the problem here? Yes. Stinginess, greed. Why were they? What is the problem here? These laborers.
Greed.
They're sitting here and they've mowed their fields. In other words, they've done all this labor. And how's these people getting rich? They're getting rich because of the fraud. They're keeping back what should have been paid to the laborers. They're pocketing it. And I understand that the word field here in the Greek doesn't mean like a field like we would understand, like when my grandparents were farmers and stuff, and they had maybe have several fields where they planted their cotton and stuff. The fields here is like the land of Galilee. I mean, this is like big, huge fields. So there's a lot of laborers involved in this, and what they were doing is here they'd get all this work done, then when it come time to pay them, they would keep it, and they wasn't paying them. So that's how part of the ways that they were accumulating their wealth, and their cries has gone out to the Lord, and the Lord of Sabbath. Anybody know what the Lord of Sabbath means there?
Well, maybe making reference to the fact that these people are also skipping the Sabbath days, the days of Sabbath, days, Sabbath of days, Sabbath of weeks, Sabbath of years, and so on. That's one reason that God destroyed them, because they weren't keeping the Sabbath days.
And another idea here is the word Sabbath here means host. So they were, host is kind of like the Lord of, he's got armies and stuff, angels, different things of whatever his armies is, and whatever his hosts are, whatever he's hosting. These cries have gone out to this Lord of his armies and Lord of his hosts that he has to combat and go against these cries that's coming out to him. And isn't it kind of ironic that in chapter 2 and the first few verses there, who were they showing partiality to? Do you remember?
Rich.
To the rich. And now look what the rich. James says, isn't the rich the ones that carries you to court? Isn't the rich the ones that make blaspheme this noble name by which you're called? Isn't the rich that carry you to court and sue you and do all these kinds of things? That's the people that you want to show partiality to. Look at it now. They're the ones that's keeping back you're not. Today, you know, a lot of times people don't want to work. That wasn't the problem here. It wasn't that they wasn't wanting to work or that they wasn't working. It was they was working, and they deserved wages for what they were doing, and yet these rich people were oppressing them to the point that they wouldn't even pay them what they've earned, what they deserved. And because of that, every day we get our daily food. That's what Jesus in the Mount said, you know, thank you for your food that you get daily, your daily food. Well, they were, in that day and time, a lot of times you got paid by the day, and whatever, when you got paid, that's what you, especially the poor, that's what they primarily used it for, was to get food. Well, they're not getting paid, so they're going hungry.
I think on the old law, I think they were required to get their pay at the end of the day.
Right.
Didn't carry it over to the next day.
Right, and that's the issue here. You know, I plowed your field. I've done what I'm supposed to do. Why are we, you know, we're going hungry because you're not paying us. So these cries is going out to the Lord of Sabbath, and these reapers have, where's my money? And my family's going hungry, and I'm hurting. And in verse 5, you have lived on the earth in pleasure and luxury, and you have fattened your hearts as in a day of slaughter. Boy, they've got it made right now, don't they? I mean, they living in luxury. They living high on the hog. Kind of reminds me of the rich man and Lazarus. You know, here the rich man had all this food and stuff. He was eating good. And instead of giving some to Lazarus that was begging for food, even the dogs got the scraps. He wouldn't even give the scraps to the Lazarus, the beggar. And it kind of reminds me of this. They're building up treasure right now. But their treasure that they're building up is going to be God's wrath. That's what he told them. You're living high on the hog. You're in high cotton. That's what we used to say. You're living in high cotton. And we loved that high cotton, didn't we? Because of our backs. I really wasn't much on the high cotton. I didn't really care for it, but I was young and it didn't hurt my back then. Now, I'd want the higher the cotton, the better, if you still picked it. This part where it says you have fattened your hearts as in a day of slaughter. I remember I was about 12 years old when I did a 4-H project, and I bought me a pig. And you had to keep these documents and everything up on what you were doing for this 4-H project. You would put all the money you spent and talk about the time you had spent and all this kind of good stuff. So I remember before I'd go to school, man, I'd get in there and I'd feed that pig. And I couldn't hardly wait till I got back home from school so I could feed the pig again. This pig had become my friend because I had never been interested before in the prices of pigs. But boy, every day I checked the price of the pigs to see what they looked like. And I'd fattened that thing up, and boy, I was ready to carry it to the sale. And Daddy, of course, was raised by a farmer, and he said he's not quite topped out yet. You need to wait just a little while longer because he's not quite topped out. I'm sitting there looking at the prices of the pigs. That's what I'm looking at. And when I look at the prices of the pig, I thought, well, man, when I get through doing this one, I may get me a couple more pigs and do this. Well, in the process of me waiting for the pig to top out like Dad told me, he said I needed to do, guess what happened to the prices? Boom, plummeted. I broke even. I was grateful to break even on it, but I pretty much broke even. I thought to myself, man, if I just sold that little, 12 years old, when you start looking at the money I was going to be making, I was like, I was going to be in high cotton. I was like, man, this is good. I'm going to get me 2 or 3 pigs if I can do this for one. And then when that happened, I was through with pigs. No longer did I have an interest in having and growing these pigs and making money because it was a lot of work. But it did teach me some valuable lessons. So that's one thing I did get out of it. But here, like this, like I was doing this pig, I was fattening him up. For me, it was about money. For the people that got him at the sale barn and stuff, it was about money, but it was about sausage money and stuff like that. So that's the first thing I thought of when I read this part here, that you're fattening yourselves up for a day of slaughter. And you're using all these riches that God's blessed you with, and all you're doing with it, because the way you're using it, is you're fattening yourself up for the judgment day. And you're going to be held responsible for that. In verse 6, you have condemned, you have murdered the just, and he does not resist you. Again, going back to here they are at one time showing partiality to this rich people. Maybe it was because maybe they would show them favor. You know, maybe, you know, they'll do them a favor if they'll treat them in a special way. But they were, you know, here they are, they had these riches dragging them into court and using their financial influence to get what they wanted, and by holding back the things that the poor needed in order to survive. Not just have extra, but in order to be able to just to eat and have clothes that you know, to put on. And you have condemned and you have murdered the just. And from what I understand and kind of looking into this, part of the reason, part of what's going on is, say the rich really kind of controlled the seed that the farmers needed to plant. And, you know, just like you do now, a lot of times farmers would go, and like my granddad and all those did, they would go and borrow money from the bank to get the plants, you know, the seeds, and get everything they needed for their crops and everything. And when the crops came in and they got all their money from everything, then they go settle that with the bank, and then whatever's left over, that's what you're going to live on for the year until the next crop come in. Well, when you're the rich and you're controlling the seed, as long as these poor farmers could make a little bit of money and pay them back, everything was pretty much hunky-dory. But what if they didn't quite make enough? Now what these rich people would do and how they would oppress them is, okay, you owe me this money and you're not able to pay me. What I'll do is I'll use your land as collateral, basically. And so now, with them using their land as collateral, and then if they don't get to pay, guess what they're going to do? They're going to carry them to court, and then they're going to own their land. So they were amassing up this land that belonged to the poor because they couldn't pay them. And so this is part of the way that they were condemning these people, and the poor people. He says, and he does not resist you. Resist means like go to battle with. Well, they couldn't go to battle. How are they going to go to battle? They ain't got no money. They're poor. And they ain't got the means to be able to fight these rich people that was oppressing them. And so you can imagine how the temptation now to retaliate is pretty high. I want to get you back. Why you want to get you back? Because you look what you're doing to me and how you're treating me. So that's part of their problem. That's here's James' message is, and is it Memorex, or do you have real Christian endeavors and patience and persevering to the point where you can be patient? Are you being a Memorex, or do you have the real faith and real maturity? Because what real mature Christians are going to do here is they're going to be patient and they're going to persevere. And that's James 5. Actually, it's 7 through 11, but this has 12 here. So the next thing we want to look at is what James is writing and telling them to do, and in spite of all that's going on here, is therefore be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently for it until it receives the early and latter rain. So, because of all this, therefore, what's therefore, it's because of what's been said before, that you need to be patient. You need to endure. You need to persevere, and let God be the one that does the judging. And he gives an example of patience and endurance here of this farmer. And the farmer has to wait in order for him to take advantage of his profits, or if he's going to eat some of the fruits that comes from of his farming. He needs a lot of things. They depend on a lot of things, but here we're just going to touch on part of them. They needed that early and latter rain. In other words, you need to be patient just like the farmer does so when the crop comes in, then you partake of that crop and partake of the benefits of the crop. Well, you need to remember, I know when I was younger, I heard this phrase a lot, and that didn't mean as much to me then as it does now. It says that God doesn't settle all counts in September. Y'all remember, some of y'all remember hearing that phrase. Well, most of the time, what that means is let God take care of things in His time and in His way. And what that meant to the farmers in our day and time, of course, was in September, most of the time you got your whatever money you needed, and you got to settle up with everything, the banks and everything in September after primarily my mother's dad dealt with cotton. And so you've been to the gin, you've got your money now, you go to the bank, you pay them back, and you live on whatever that wasn't then. But you got to be patient. Farmer can't just go out there and start picking cotton when the bowls ain't even opened up. That's not going to do any good. He's got to wait till the early and latter rains. And I'll talk a little bit more about, a lot of you have been around farm more than I have, but both grandparents been raised on a farm. I was picking cotton when I couldn't even hardly walk. So this is his message is, just be patient and don't take everything in matters into your own hands. Let God do it. And so you be like that farmer that waits on his early and latter rains and stuff, and the crops come in. Then everything can be settled. And he's saying to James' readers here, y'all be patient. Y'all endure. You persevere. And then let the Lord, until the coming of the Lord, let Him deal with it. And don't get ahead of God. Don't get behind God. Just walk with God in this situation. And the idea here goes back to James chapter 1 and verse 12. Someone read that that's got that. James 1:12.
Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love Him.
Okay, here the idea is, back in the first part of chapter 1, the very first part of it, you had him, James, there talking about what the purpose of trials and temptations was to increase endurance, was to produce endurance, produce patience. And then he said, let these temptations and trials do their work, because when it's worked, then it makes you a complete, entire, full-grown, full of faith man. So here he is now. They're going through a different kind of temptation and trial and persecution, and these rich farmers are oppressing them. And the idea they had was to, well, let's just take matters into our own hands. Let's retaliate. And so now James is telling them to be patient and to endure patience and let the Lord, put it in the hands of the Lord and let Him take care of that. Verse 8, you also be patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Here, when you need your heart to be strengthened, be patient. You just like that farmer, you be patient and establish your hearts. And that means strengthen your hearts. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, one, to understand that the coming of the Lord is at hand. It's shortly. It's coming. It's soon coming. His judgment is on them. So don't take it in your own hands. And so, you know, a farmer, he's concerned about a lot of things that's come out there. The rains was part of it. I know my granddaddy, my mother's my mother's dad was always the worry ward one. He worried about everything. He wanted to, okay, I need to get rain. We ain't getting no rain. I need rain. So then the rain starts, and then it's like, oh, Lord, I hope it don't come too much rain. You know, I need just the right amount of rain so I can get this crop just right. So he was kind of a worry ward. He was always, well, am I going to get enough rain? Or, Lord, I hope it don't get too much rain. All them boll weevils, that stuff, I hope we can get them taken and they don't come in and overtake the crop. And grass, boy, I've got to get out there and I've got to get that field chopped. And so if I don't, because the grass is going to take over. And it was just so many things that farmers have to kind of be concerned about. And how are you going to establish your heart? How are you going to get that strength you need, you know, from it? Understand that don't retaliate. Be patient, endure. Let nature take its course as far as the crops goes, and let God take care of these rich that are pressing you. Somebody read Romans 12:19. Henry, if you got it, you can go ahead.
I don't have it. I just read it. I was going to let somebody else get it, but 12:19.
12. Okay, go ahead, Scott.
Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord.
Okay, so here it is. Here God is telling us, and Paul's telling us in his writing here, is don't take vengeance in your own hand. Let God take care of it. Turn it over to Him, and just hand your persecutions, your trials, the things that you're going through, and especially here in this particular part, these rich people that are oppressing you, turn it over to God and be patient and let Him do His work off of it. So that's the main idea here. Verse 9, do not grumble against one another, brethren, lest you be condemned. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. The very first thing I thought of when I read this is hangry. And I think all of us has had that feeling, you know. When I get hangry, I'm like, if you don't get me some food really soon, somebody's going to pay. Because I'm hungry. I don't have time to wait. I don't want to go to the fast food restaurant. I want to go to the one where they have the buffet. So I could get right in there real quick and get something. I don't care what it is. Give me a candy bar. Give me something. Is that the first bell? Second bell? Okay. Give me something anyway, because I'm hungry. And if I don't get something pretty soon, I'm not going to be good to be dealt with. That's kind of what reminds me of what this verse is saying here. Don't get so angry. Don't get so caught up in your persecutions and your problems and everything else that you start going to other brethren and start saying, grumbling with them and complaining with them. They ain't got nothing to do with it. You know, so they're probably going through the same thing you are, and they may be a little bit hangry too. So don't start grumbling against one another, against your brother. We'll pick up with there next week. Maybe. We're going to push for next week to try to finish this. I don't know that will happen, but that's what we're going to try to do. Thank you so much for your attention, and